My daughter-in-law didn't show up at my son's funeral. Hours later, she posted a beach toast in Aruba with a Pilates trainer. The caption read, "Choose joy now." I was still in a black suit counting the 31 who came. Then my phone lit up with my son's number. "Dad, come to my house now, don't tell anyone." I froze. If you want the full story, subscribe to the channel and tell me the city you're watching from. The chapel carpet looked like wet ash. Tuesday wore a hospital gray that flattened faces. I stood with a folded eulogy in my hand and felt the soft give of paper worn thin by fingers. Lilies breathed their polite sweetness. The air did not argue. The funeral home clock read 2:17. I watched the second hand circle like it had nowhere better to be. The back doors stayed shut. I had asked to keep them unlatched in case she ran late. The brass bar waited. Nothing moved. The director eased to my shoulder. His voice was designed for rooms like this. "Mr. Calder, should we wait a few more minutes?" I kept my eyes on the clock. "No, we begin." I set the paper on the pulpit. The wood felt warm under my palm. I looked up and counted. I always count. In the row of faces, there were neighbors from the old cul-de-sac, 2 men from Adam's firm with tie knots too tight, my brother with his hands clasped as if something inside him wanted to fly and he could not allow it, the baseball coach who once caught a screaming line drive barehanded and laughed about the bruise for a week. I counted again. 31. Later, the guest count card would show 29 signatures. The difference would bother me the way a picture frame a degree off bothers a certain kind of man. There is a sound a room makes when it decides to be quiet. The shuffle of coats, the last cough, the creak that picks a place and settles. I glanced once more at the doors. The hinges were still. The brass bar kept its secret. I began with the small true things. He kept a notebook for every car he ever owned and logged oil changes like a priest marks time. He hated a crooked frame and would fix it in a stranger's house after 10 minutes because it hurt to leave the world half right. He ate the heel of the bread because he said someone should. People smiled at that, the kind of smile that costs. I did not speak of the tightness that had been living in his chest these last years, how he would walk at 2 in the morning to unwind the wire. He could not show anyone. I did not say that marriage can turn into a hallway with doors that will not open when you need them. I did not say Brooke's name aloud. The clock kept moving anyway. I lifted the paper and gave them the scaffolding. Northwestern. A windowless office he loved because it was his. The first client call he took was standing in the kitchen because his desk was a salvaged door on 2 sawhorses. The day he told me he would start his own firm, and I said nothing for a long minute and then said, "Good." Sometimes a father only gets one word right. If it is good, that is enough. 2:18. The chapel held. A woman near the aisle folded a tissue along the same crease over and over. The coach stared at the hymn board like it was an outfield fence. I glanced at the doors. No movement. A whisper found a path along the pews. "Where is his wife?" It rode the air and sat in my ear. It did not accuse me. It accused the shape the day had taken. That whisper stung harder than any sermon because it knew exactly where to land. I stayed with the paper. He drove 2 hours to fix a pipe for a man who could not pay. He pretended not to notice a stray dog for 6 blocks, so the animal could choose him first. He let other people go ahead at 4-way stops because they always seemed more in a hurry. He was a man who thought of order as kindness. A chair answered with a small complaint. The organist cleared his throat without sound. The lilies kept speaking their sweet language. The doors did not open. The director shifted again, smoothing his lapel. He had the steps of someone trained not to startle grief. I said that my son did not leave without leaving the light on. He left smaller fixtures that a person could carry. A way to stack tools by size. A way to write the date on a filter. A way to keep receipts in a clear plastic sleeve so the numbers do not smudge into one another. These are the things that hold a day together when the meat of it falls apart. I folded the eulogy and kept my hand there. My palm learned the shape of the words through the paper. The choir stood. We rose with our coats and bones. The hymn found the right key on the second attempt. A man in the back wept without moving his face. At the casket, I placed my hand on the edge where the varnish made a calm lake. I did not linger. I had done my looking before anyone came in when the room was only me and the clock and the sound a building makes when it breathes. I said something plain that belonged only to us. It landed. It stayed. People filed by. The phrases came like coins in a dish. He was a good man. You spoke well. Call if you need anything. Call if you need anything is what we say when a moment asks more from us than we have in the pocket. I nodded. I kept my mouth civil. I watched the doors because some part of me believed the hinge might change its mind. 2:26. The whisper returned in another mouth. Where is his wife? Wife came out with a thin hiss like air slipping from a tire. Dignity loses pressure slowly. You do not notice until the rim kisses the road. The director gestured to the guest book table. I walked there. The book had muscle to it the way paper can when it holds the weight of names. The guest count card was tucked under the cover, 29 lines in careful ink. I traced 2 of them and knew which faces would never follow with a call. This is not bitterness. It is logistics in a suit. The director said we can wait another moment if you think she might arrive. He did not say Brooke. That omission was a kindness and an indictment. I said no. We go now. My voice did not wobble. I did not give the day that. I picked up the pen and signed with the steadiness you learn when you know flourishes are for other rooms. I set the pen down. The small chain made its circle. I closed the book. The cover met the pages with a slow scratch. It sounded like a hinge turning on a door that had decided to stay shut. 3 hours later, a stranger's sunlit rectangle lit my kitchen. The house had the aftertaste of a service. Suits draped on chairbacks, a program half folded near the sink. I set the guest count card on the counter as if it were a receipt for grief. 29 in blue ink, 31 in my head. Math that would not agree. I had never opened Instagram. I knew it the way a person knows a highway he never takes. I touched the icon my neighbor's grandson had installed months ago and forgot. The screen bloomed. A white field, a search bar, a suggestion wheel that did not know me. I typed slowly. First name, last name, Brooke Ellis. The letters felt like putting a thumb on a bruise. A list of Brooks arrived. Smiles with dogs, weddings by barns, quotes about light. I recognized her jawline in a small circle with last year's hair. Tap. Her profile opened like a door that had only been waiting for the right hand. The grid was a parade of curated days. Brunch plates bright as decals, yoga lines against windows. A kitchen remodel I had paid for in quiet installments because Adam said it would be good for morale. Photos from Phoenix with her sister, 2 days old. A glass was raised. Eyes were surprised at nothing. I scrolled. My thumb learned its work too fast. There it was, new. Posted while I stood at the casket pretending strength was a posture. Brooke is in a red swimsuit the color of a stop sign you see too late. Water behind her was blue enough to sell. Her mouth opened in a laugh that showed no cost. A man beside her with forearms he wanted to notice. Javier, their landscaper. His hand rested at her waist, as if the world had always meant it. The location tag said Isla Coral. I knew the name only because travel ads like to find fathers when they are between bills. The caption sat under the picture with the confidence of a motto. Life's short, choose light, no punctuation. The tone of a person who thinks the word light absolves the shadow required to make it. My thumb drifted to the comments because that is what thumbs do when the mind retreats. Hearts stacked like a drip. Sunshine emojis that believe tragedy is a weather you can chase off with bright faces. A friend wrote, "Finally free." The words had teeth so small you only feel the bite after the blood shows. I scrolled more. Her sister arrived with the sentence that slid a knife between her ribs without raising her voice. So glad the drama is over. Over for who I said to the air. The room did not answer. Rooms never do. I widened the photo with my fingers. Red against blue. Her shoulder freckle I knew from a July lake 6 summers back when Adam grilled and the corn went sweet. The bracelet I had given them on their 5th anniversary, a fine line of gold she said was almost too simple in a tone that made simple sound like a failure of imagination. She wore it now on a wrist that rested on Javier's shoulder like a claim. I heard the refrigerator hum, reach for a higher note and hold. The ice maker groaned. I pulled a glass from the cabinet out of habit more than thirst. The door magnet a roofing company had left years ago curled at one edge. Adam had called that number once for a leak. I remember because he told me afterward he had watched the man's hands more than the shingles. He liked competence. It calmed him. I put the phone flat on the counter and then picked it up again because flat felt like surrender. I scrolled. Another photo. Sunset with 2 drinks and 2 shadows long as the proposal. A story panel with a quick video. The red suit enters the sea. The trainer says something in a laugh that they do not understand about funerals. A caption sticker loops in cheerful font. Choose joy now. The now lodged like a seed in a tooth. Notification bubbles dotted the edges. A mutual friend wrote, "So proud of you for choosing happiness." Another wrote, "You deserve new beginnings." A third said, "Grief is a prison you unlock yourself from." I turned the volume down, though no sound played. The quiet seemed like formality in this company. A direct message icon pulsed a number. Not mine, hers. I did not touch it. I am old enough to know the difference between evidence and temptation. I took a photo of the whole page with my other phone, not a screenshot. A picture of a screen is of worse quality and more believable to some kinds of people. Later I would give that to someone who understands forms. The room carried the afternoon's gray with it. Light through the blinds cut the counter into ledges. I watched dust do what it always does. The freezer cycled. The flower program curled at one corner and leaned toward the sink. I scrolled again. Her sister's comment had replies. Heart hands, beach chairs. 1 line with 3 clapping icons and 2 champagne bottles. Celebration types forget that punctuation can be a crowbar. It pries a moment open until the hinge snaps. I thought about that hinge at the chapel. I thought about the bar that did not move. Another friend asked about the man. That trainer, though. Brooke had answered with a wavy line and a word that tried to be coy and landed on cruel. Sore. Jokes are built like easy furniture. No tools required. I put the phone down again. The ice tray spilled 3 cubes into the bin. The sound was a small break. I filled my glass halfway with water. The first swallow did nothing. The second reminded me that there is a reason the body keeps asking for the simple things. Air, water, a place to sit, a memory with a soft edge to hold so the sharp one does not keep cutting. My thumb went back to the grid. I did not recognize myself in this action. It felt like borrowing a stranger's appetite. Tap, back, tap. The way a person opens drawers in a hotel where he is not staying. Searching for proof that he exists in rooms he has not paid for. Under the first photo, a comment from a name I knew only from a Christmas card address. She wrote that he would want you to be happy. I said the sentence under my breath so I could hear how it tastes when a person who did not count the 31 uses a dead man's wish to bless someone else's appetite. He would want nothing you are doing. He would want a chair at his own service filled. He would want a hand on my shoulder that was not mine. Over for who, I said again, quieter. The faucet dripped once. The drop hit the steel and made a sound that kept going inside my skull. I enlarged the photo a final time until pixels gave up. Brooke's eyes became squares. The line of her mouth turned jagged. Javier's hand blurred into the water and pretended to be a shadow. The trick of distance is that it forgives what up close cannot. I let the image fall back to its shape, red and blue. A caption that refused a period because periods imply responsibility. I set the phone down on the guest count card without thinking and then moved it because paper deserves better than glass. I took another swallow of water. My hand shook a little and then remembered itself. A long time ago on a July porch, I watched Adam text Brooke for the first time. His face lit when the response came fast. He had said she types like she already knows me. In that moment, it had sounded like luck. Today it sounded like a forecast no one read. The phone lit again with its own life. An alert I did not recognize asked if I wanted to see more from Isla Coral. The app thought it was helping. I closed the suggestion. I put the phone face down. The rectangle's light died on the marble and the room returned to the normal color of late afternoon. The glass in my hand gave a small clink when the ice cracked. The sound startled the house into admitting it had been holding its breath. The refrigerator's hum swelled a patient engine at the far edge of effort, then stopped. A new number buzzed. Adam's name wasn't on it, but his voice was. Dad has come to my house now. Do not call anyone. The words stood there like a stranger on my porch. I stared until the screen dimmed and woke again. Same message. No signature, no explanation, only the shape of my son's way of saying now without exclamation points. He never liked loud music. I did not answer. I picked up my keys. The brass ring felt heavier than it had at noon. I slid the spare for Adam's place between my fingers and let the cold bite my palm until my hand understood what we were doing. The house listened. I took my coat from the chair like I was trying not to wake a sleeping dog. Outside, the air was the blue that happens right before the lamps come on. I walked to the car with the automatic steps of a man who has done this walk for decades. The engine turned. The radio tried to offer a voice. I turned it off. At the first light, I looked down and read the message again. No new words had grown. The roads between my house and Adam's were muscle memory, left at the elm that leans, over the tracks that set the frame humming, past the used car lot where the tall balloons lean into winter like tired men. My hand stayed at 10 and 2. I breathed like the doctor had told me after the small stroke that did not cause anything obvious symptoms. In through the nose, out through the mouth, as if air could carry instructions. I told myself what I knew. The service had ended. The house had been quiet except for a refrigerator that remembered its job. A woman I once called daughter had been laughing in red while the day asked me to learn a new kind of math. Now a number I did not know was telling me to go to a house that had learned how to be still. These are facts. They do not make sense. They do not have to at the beginning. I turned onto his street. The trees held their dry leaves like secrets. The porch lights here are proud of being sensible. No wreaths, no flags. The window over Adam's sink glowed the way it always does when someone forgets the switch, and the bulb does the remembering. The kitchen light makes a soft pool on the lawn. Tonight it did that. I parked in front. I sat with both hands on the wheel as if I had arrived early to a test. The message was still on the phone. The timestamp made my stomach drop a fraction. It had come while I was holding the glass and listening to ice break a promise. I opened the door. The cold entered the car like a fact. On the 6 steps up to the porch, I felt the brass ring against my knuckles. The spare key was the one with the small nick from the time the lock had stuck and Adam told me to give it a little love. I held it the way you hold a small tool when you do not want to drop it. The porch boards gave the same complaint they always give under my weight. I reached the door and listened. Nothing. No television, no music, no voices. I looked at the neighbor's hibiscus cut back to stubs for winter and thought of how life knows how to hide its green. I put the key in. The cylinder turned without argument. I stepped in and shut the door with the polite push you give when you do not want a room to feel invaded. The house smelled like a place that had been closed, but not dead. Coffee is old enough to remember heat. Paper, a little dust. I stood at the threshold long enough to let my eyes learn the dark. The kitchen light threw a rectangle across the floor. It was the only light on. I said his name once, not loud, the way you call a person in a library when you have found the book he needs. The refrigerator gave a patient hum. The furnace thumped once like a hand on a table to steady itself. I moved to the kitchen. On the table sat a mug with a ring of brown and a skin like a pond in winter when the top freezes before the rest understands. The mug had gone cold. Beside it, a spoon lay clean, which meant he had not stirred sugar into anything here. The chair was pulled out just far enough to prove a person had used it. The lamp over the sink made a small halo on the laminate. He was at the table, thin in the way a man gets when food tastes like errands. Eyes set back like someone had moved them a little farther into his head. Stubble that had not asked permission. His hands were on the table like a student waiting for the bell. The old wool sweater from college that I always thought made him look like the captain of something. I stopped. That is not a metaphor. My body did not move. The phone in my pocket might as well have been a brick. My heart made a decision, and then changed it. He looked up like it hurt to lift his eyes. I said the only true sentence available to me. I buried you. He nodded. The movement was slow, as if his neck had grown old without warning. I know. The room stretched. I heard the clock on the stove mark a minute that insisted on existing. I kept standing. He kept sitting. We were 2 men in a photograph that no one would believe. His hands were shaking, not the dramatic tremor of illness, the small ripples of a person who has been cold too long and has only now remembered he has a blanket. I sat because the floor felt farther away than I trusted. The chair legs scraped the tile with the honesty of wood on stone. He tried to smile, and the attempt died in the doorway. He looked at the mug like it might tell him what to say. I looked at the lines at the corner of his mouth that were new. We both picked up our breathing from the places we had set it down earlier. He said "Dad" in a voice that made me think of when he was 5 and had fallen on gravel and was trying to choose between crying and pride. I lifted my hand and stopped it halfway like I was signaling a plane. He understood. I did not want words to clog the room before we knew what the room wanted to be. He said I need to explain. I said you would. Not yet. He nodded again. He was learning to agree with the physics of this moment. The house made a small settling noise. A heating duct corrected itself. Somewhere a neighbor closed a door, and the sound reached us after it was useful. I noticed the spare key still in my fist where I had held it so long the brass had warmed. I set it on the table with care as if it were evidence. He looked at the key first as if to confirm I had not broken in. Then he looked at my face like he was trying to read a gauge. He said, "I'm sorry." The words were plain. No bows. They landed and sat. My eyes went to the light over the sink. It flickered once like a blink and then held. I remembered replacing that bulb in the spring. Adam had watched me from this chair and told me the ladder made me look taller. He had laughed then. The laugh had arrived late the way it always did with him and stayed longer than we thought it would. I said, "Tell me one thing and then the rest." He nodded again. I said, "Are you hurt?" He answered, "Not yet." He swallowed. The skin at his throat moved like it had forgotten the choreography. My hands finally found the table. The wood was cool. The grain was a map I had read often. I let my fingers trace one line as if I could travel somewhere better by staying still. He put his hands flat, and the shaking calmed a fraction. I could feel grief trying to renegotiate its contract. It had been signed for permanence at noon. Now it wanted to add clauses about exceptions and conditions. I did not let it. I let everything be present at once. The casket, the red, the blue. The caption had refused a period. The unknown number that knew my name. He lifted the mug and then set it down without drinking. The small sound it made against the table was a punctuation mark that did not belong to either of us. In the silence, I heard the kettle from earlier on the back of the stove tick as it cooled. It ticked the way a cooling engine tells you a distance has been traveled and there is no point arguing with the miles. He didn't fake death for money. He faked it for a time. He said it flat. Not brave, not dramatic. Just the right weight for a room where truth could not afford garnish. He slid a small black thumb drive across the table with 2 fingers if it might bite. It had a strip of red tape on one side. Someone had written A2 in tiny block letters. His handwriting when he wants no flourish. I did not touch it. I watched it the way you watch a coiled thing. He waited. He let the quiet do some work. Ardent Therapeutics, he said. The arthritis program. I found a drift in their phase 3 numbers. Drift was his polite word. He gave me the real one after. Falsification. Adverse events moved from one column to another. Pain scores massaged. A registry that suddenly had fewer names on the mornings after the worst nights. He took a breath. The kind you measure before you pick up a heavy box. I started with questions, he said. We all do. A statistician flagged an outlier. I asked for source files. They sent me summaries. I asked again. They sent me slides. The third time I wrote a memo with words you cannot misunderstand. They flew me to a hotel with low carpet and a conference table that pretends to be wood. Milton Grady was there, the CEO. He smiled like a dentist. He said innovation is messy. He said the patients in question were already poor candidates. He said regulators are risk-averse and I should help them see the bigger picture. My hands found the grain of the table again. The late light bleached the wood into stripes. He placed 2 pages in front of me. Email printouts. The names were blacked out with a marker that bled a little. The subject lines were not. RE harmonized reporting across centers. RE timing adverse events with washout windows. RE call with FDA liaison talking points. Anonymized headers still showed the dates. Too close to quarterly calls to be a coincidence. I told him I could not sign off, he said. He reached into his sweater and pulled a second sheet, the copy of a wire template. 380,000. That was the number Dad. It fit in a manila envelope like any other offer. He said it was a bridge to help us get through the rough patch. He said he admired my principles and wanted to remove obstacles. He smiled again. I thought about how smiles can be weapons if you care about being liked. You took it, I said. He shook his head once. Not like a hero, like a man who has learned the cost of pause. No. I came home and sat at this table and tried to believe the word no would be enough. It wasn't. He tapped the thumb drive. I did what I knew how to do. I built a packet. Source files, audit trails, a map from raw to reported, the parts that didn't line up. Then I walked into an office where the hallway carpets are government brown and the coffee tastes like a bad apology. The feds, I said. He nodded. A field office downtown. 2 agents with legal pads who had the posture of men who have to testify. I gave them the packet and a list of names who could verify the pieces without knowing they were doing it. They scheduled a follow-up. They used the phrase cooperating witness and asked if I understood what that meant. He looked at me then because he wanted to see if I would flinch on his behalf. I didn't. You did the right thing, I said. The room believed me because I meant it. It got loud after that, he said. Not in public. The quiet kind of loud. My phone lit up at hours when men who run companies remember they are animals. Calls from numbers that return nothing if you try to redial. Phrases that sound generic until you realize they know which streets you take home. My accountant received a friendly audit. A client got a letter implying conflict. My car had a valve stem shaved down to the kind of failure that reads like bad luck. One night a man sat at the end of the bar I never use and said I should consider climates with fewer seasons. He pulled a thin file from the chair beside him. Inside were photos of envelopes, each with a postmark that had to be seen twice to understand it meant attention, not postage. A copy of an email from a no-reply address that knew the middle name of his high school baseball coach. Fear does detail. It loves detail. When did you decide to die, I asked. He stared at the mug. The skin on the coffee shimmered where the lamp played at warmth. Not to decide, he said. Agree. Dr. Lena Cho and I went to college. She knows what monitors see and what they miss when people are tired and machines are older than the budget says. She said if I stayed in place, the odds would turn. Men like Grady have reach, not just money. Friends with judges of small things that add up. I needed to be unavailable. Off the board long enough for indictments to hatch into arrests. He placed another sheet on the pile. A routine chart with a timestamp and a motion artifact that made a line wobble where it should have been smooth. Catatonic states read flat when the monitor cables are old. A Monday with 2 code browns and a broken elevator makes minds hurry to conclusions. A way to let a mistake look like a mistake. He did not smile. We do not smile about this. You let me bury nothing. I said. It came out harder than I intended. He winced but did not look away. I thought disappearing protected you, he said. The words were small because they did not have to be big to carry their load. If I stayed, men who make problems vanish would visit our door. If I went quietly, you could grieve in daylight and then breathe again before anyone had reason to circle back. I would surface when papers had been filed and the part of the storm that knows names had blown east. How long, I said. 6 months, he said. That was the plan. Long enough for the first wave to pass and the second to be paperwork. He slid his thumb along the table edge. He did not look at me when he said the next part. Brooke knew. She was supposed to play the widow who keeps her head down. No interviews, no travel, no spending made a story. We had dates marked. We had lists. We rehearsed what we would say if anyone asked about Phoenix or her sister. I felt the breath leave my ribs in a slow way that did not look like anything from the outside. She knew, I said. He nodded. She knew. He picked up the anonymized emails again and tapped a corner into a square. I thought if she had a script, she could live inside it for a while, he said. I thought if she could picture an end, she could carry the middle without adding more weight. He looked at the thumb drive. I thought a lot of things that did not include beaches. I let my hand hover over the drive. I did not pick it up. I said, "Who else knows you are not in the ground?" He counted on his fingers because numbers help some truths behave. Dr. Cho, Agent Klein, Attorney Noor, a tech at the hospital we paid to look the other way, and who never wants to hear from me again. He looked at me. And you. The refrigerator motor kicked on. The sound was steadying. A thing in the house decided to do its job again. The neon from the deli across the street folded into the window and laid a soft red line across the table and our hands. The color slid over the thumb drive and turned the tape's red into a deeper shade that looked like a warning and a promise at once. He said, "You can ask me anything." I said, "I will, just not all tonight." He breathed out like a pilot after a landing. We sat with the humming appliance and the streetlight and the pile of papers that changed the shape of the room. He picked up the mug and swallowed the cold because talking needs something to do with the mouth when it is done speaking. I finally let my finger touch the drive. Plastic and tape and what a human can hold against a company when the company decides its math matters more than pain. The neon pulsed once. The motor held its note. Outside, a car turned the corner and threw a sweep of light across the ceiling like a hand blessing a table. The folder labeled, "Ellis did not contain memories." It contained math. Adam slid it toward me as if it might leak. Gray cardboard broad enough to flatten a life. Inside, plastic sleeves held their breath. Each tab had a month. Each month had a plan. He started with the clean pages, policy applications in a neat parade. Scans with polite headers and boxes that make people feel safe. The first for 250, the second for 5. Another for 3. Then a rider nested like a hidden hook. Totals added themselves to 1.4 million without breaking a sweat. He touched a highlighted line with the back of his nail. Beneficiary Brooke Ellis. Signature Adam Calder. The signature looked like his in the way a photograph looks like the person you miss. Almost. The loop on the D leaned wrong. The cross on the T forgot where your hand pauses. I had watched him sign mortgage papers at my kitchen table. He always left a millimeter of daylight under the line as if he did not want to bruise the paper. This one pressed hard. He slid the next sleeve free. Underwriting emails printed and blacked out where names pretend not to matter. A note about medical disclosures with a sentence that reads to reassure the client about contestability. A timestamp that fell on a day I remembered for another reason. The day Adam helped me move the old drill press and laughed when my back reminded me of birthdays. He turned a tab. Hotel receipts. 2 Hampton Inns, 1 downtown boutique, and a lake resort that sells clean sheets as luxury. Names on the folios read B. Ellis or J. Cruz depending on the day. 2 people, 1 room. Charges at odd hours with minibar lines that spelled out nights. Javier Cruz services appeared on a separate printout. Bank wires, 800 here, 1100 there. Memo lines vague in the way criminals think is clever. Yard, supplies, consultation. He placed a stack of text screenshots on top. Messages to a private investigator named Marcus with a logo that tried too hard to be discreet. She wrote about Adam's anxiety like it were a prop. He is forgetful lately, drinks alone, stands at the window till dawn, worries that he might harm himself. The replies were professional to the point of cruelty. We can build a record, we can help you create documentation. A plan that pretended to be concerned. Adam did not look at me. He kept his eyes on the pile like you do when you diffuse something that will never be safe again. He pulled a draft that made my throat go tight, a note written in a font that imitates handwriting. Dear Dad, I am sorry for the mess I have made. It will be easier for everyone if I stop trying. Please take care of Brooke. She is the only good thing I ever got right. The date field was empty. The signature block waited like an open mouth. I felt my hand find the table edge. The wood held. I asked how long she has been building this. He did not answer right away. He reached for the policy pages again and flipped to the first issue date. 2 years and 10 weeks ago. He tapped another. 2 years and 2 days. The suicide clauses on all of them pay after 2 years, he said. She cued this long before Ardent. She had the patience that most people spend on love. He set down another sheet, a calendar with green circles and red underlines. The circles marked dates when contestability windows closed. The red-marked dates show she flew to Phoenix. On one of those red weeks, Adam had called me to ask if I wanted his grill because he and Brooke were thinking of getting a nicer one with a rotisserie. He sounded tired, but hope still lived in his voice back then. I told him his grill was fine. He laughed and agreed. The laugh arrived late and stayed the way his did. He moved to emails that did not bother with disguise. Brooke to her sister. I cannot keep living like this. He is always anxious. He refuses help. If he keeps going, I will drown. The sister's reply floated her like a raft. You deserve peace. You deserve joy. There was a line I had seen earlier under a different photo. So glad the drama is over. The sisters knew how to change costumes. Adam placed the last sleeve on top and let it sit. It held a photo taken from a door camera across a hallway. The angle was low and unkind. Brooke and Javier are at a hotel room threshold with a weekend bag she bought on a trip I had paid for one Christmas, her hand on his neckline. His eyes were already looking past the lens. The timestamp made my skin prickle. It fell in a week when Adam said he had a migraine and canceled a meeting he had been building for a month. He finally spoke. "I thought I could fix the marriage if I fixed the rest. Money is a loud neighbor. If it quiets down, the whole street seems different." I thought she was suffocating from the noise. I did not know she was counting windows and clocks. His voice did not accuse, not even himself. It reported. I asked, "Did she ever loved you?" The question felt like a stone I had to carry from the river to the shore because it would not stop existing just because I did not want to feel it in my hand. Silence answered. Not the easy kind, the kind that knows math. I looked again at the forged signature. The sleeve magnified it just enough to show the pressure points where a hand hesitates to trace another man's habit. Whoever did this knew the form, but not the person. The law will like that, I said. He nodded once, a nod that contained both comfort and ash. He turned the folder back 2 sections and showed me a letter he had written the day before his hospital appearance. It was to an attorney. It placed a note with the insurers that if claims appeared to follow his death, they should be scrutinized under specific statutes. It included a list of circumstances that would suggest coercion or fraud. It used words with sharp edges. He had mailed it certified. The receipt sat clipped to the corner like a metal flag. He pulled out a log of calls to the PI, times and durations, a record that could be compared against her claim of grief. He had already highlighted overlaps with her spa appointments. He was not gloating. He was building a ladder out of a well. He closed his eyes for a breath. She knew about the plan to keep me off the board for 6 months, he said. She knew the dates and the lines we could not cross. Do not travel. Do not change spending. Do not change beneficiaries. Quiet. She nodded when I said the word quiet. She looked at me and nodded and said, I can do that. He opened his eyes. He did not look at me. She was already gone when she said it. All that was left was the paper trail. I remembered the caption on the beach. Choose joy now. The now had been rehearsed. I reached across and set my finger on the edge of the hotel folio. I looked at Adam's hands. The shaking had calmed but not surrendered. I said we are going to use every one of these pages. We are going to show sequence and intent and time. He nodded. He had already put tabs where a prosecutor likes tabs. He took a breath. A long one. The kind that finds ribs and asks if they are still willing to work. He said, I thought if I disappeared, I would protect you. I said you still might have in a way you did not plan. Sometimes the wrong door opens into the right room. The refrigerator motor came back to life in the next room. The sound was steady again. Outside, neon folded against the window and left a red seam across the folder. It made the tabbed months look like a wound that had decided to glow. I gathered the pages back into place. The sleeves slid with the stiffness of new plastic. The tabs aligned their colors. The spine swallowed what it had shown. My hands felt older than they had in the chapel, maybe older than when the day started. I set the folder's lid down and pressed until the latch met the loop. The latch clicked like a verdict. Dead men can still file instructions if they wrote them alive. Adam had. He had written them cleanly, dated, witnessed, sealed. We laid the pages out in rows like lumber you cite for warp. Each sheet carried a job. We started with the letters. 3 envelopes, 3 insurers. Each was drafted in his voice before the hospital. Each one was a dispute that only needed a condition to be met to fly. Condition A reported death under circumstances inconsistent with ongoing investigations. Condition B, beneficiary behavior is inconsistent with grief and consistent with fraud. Condition C, evidence of forged signatures discovered. The letters were dry as saltines. Perfect. We checked the dates. All 3 were stamped the day before the hospital called me. Pre-signed, pre-notarized. A paragraph near the bottom instructing counsel to dispatch upon the trigger. The triggers had arrived. The letters would be dated by the day they were sent. The body of them told the story that mattered. He had suspected. He had prepared. I called David Knorr from the kitchen because he is a man you speak to at tables where paper lives. He answered on the second ring like good attorneys do when they smell a schedule. I gave him the outline. He said, "I'm already in the car. 10 minutes. He meant 8. When he arrived, he wore the same navy he wore to probate court. He took off his coat without asking for a chair and read as he paced. He has a habit of touching a page with one finger when a fact lands. He did that often. He said we let her spend just enough to prove intent. The sentence found its place in the room like a tool returning to its hook. We printed the final versions of the disputes with today's date. We inserted the exhibits, photographs of the posts, the hotel folios, the wires to J. Cruise Services, the policies with the off-kilter signature. We numbered the pages at the bottom right because chaos likes to argue and numbers do not. We made 3 sets and a spare. David drafted the claim letters to the fraud departments. Formal. Polite like a man who brings a casserole to your door and then tells you you owe him a fence. He included statutes. He included administrative codes that a junior adjuster would Google twice and memorize once. He copied the special investigative units because acronyms move paper. SIU reads emails faster than claims. Next we move to the estate freeze. Probate is not romance. It is screws and threads. Adam had amended his will the day before he died. The amendment sat on my table with a notary stamp that pressed through to the pad below. It named me a personal representative for safekeeping. Not a windfall. A duty. It invoked specific language about suspected marital misconduct and financial endangerment. It did not say divorce. It said preservation of the estate against dissipation. It is a phrase that understands what people do when no one is watching. David slid the petition across for my signature. Petition to open estate. Petition for temporary restraining orders on transfer of joint assets. Petition to secure premises pending inventory. Each with a caption in the calm typeface of law. I signed. I kept my hand steady because the law likes a signature that doesn't look like it argued with itself. We added a lock change order to the list. Not by force. By authority granted under the petition once clocked. He had already scheduled the locksmith for late afternoon on the assumption of a routine filing. The man would arrive with a clipboard and a receipt and a way of not making eye contact with grief. The door would open when the court stamped and not before. David took out a small folder of tracking slips, already filled addresses hand-printed in block capitals. Overnight, adult signature required. He said paper that travels fast looks like it knows where it is going. We stacked the disputes. We slid them into envelopes with their exhibits. We pressed the flaps as if closing mouths. Agent Klein came in with his federal warrant, not a suit. A winter jacket with an ID clipped where no one could see it unless he wanted them to. He asked for the short version and did not interrupt. He took photos of the envelopes and the contents before they were sealed. He verified the timestamps on Brooks' posts. He noted the comments. He wrote down the phrase "finally free" and underlined it twice without looking up. He asked for copies of the forged signatures and shook his head once the way men do when they prefer clean crimes and cannot have them. He said, "We will not drag you into more than is necessary." He set a card down with a direct number and told me to call if anyone knocked who wasn't wearing a badge. His eyes made a quick inventory of the windows and the sight lines. Habitat checks. Pro work. We moved to the bank. Joint accounts look friendly until paper turns them into arenas. David had already sent instructions to the bank's legal department to place holds pending probate. It is not a freeze button. It is a brake pedal. The car still wants to roll. The pedal answers gravity with friction. The timing mattered. The letter will hit the bank first thing tomorrow. He had a name at the branch who knew him. We like names at branches. The probate filing went out by e-file and by hand. He liked both. One tells a computer, the other tells a clerk. The clerk prints the receipt. The receipt in my hand felt like an anchor you can carry, case number on top. County seal ghosted under the lines. I put it in a clear sleeve because that is what we do when a thing needs to be real twice. We assembled the change of beneficiary notifications that Adam had executed before the hospital day. He had cut Brooke out of the will with care. Not out of rage, out of reason. He left detailed notes about the property of the marriage versus the property of the business. He knew where the borders ran. He did not kick a fence. He marked it and moved back 2 steps so no one could say he grazed. David reviewed the executor bond requirement, waived because of the amendment and the circumstances. He flagged a hearing that would be scheduled if she contested. He placed a tab on that section and wrote in pencil because courts prefer pencil humility. He said, "We aim to make that hearing a reading, not an argument. We built a timeline on one sheet. Date of policy, date of writer, date clause matured, date of hotel, date of wire, date of post, date of dispute. Dates stacked like bricks you could stand on and not wobble. The sheet would become Exhibit A in every room that mattered." Agent Klein suggested a quiet note to the local precinct so a cruiser would pass by the house for the next week. Not a spectacle, a presence. Brooke would read the notice on the door. She would see fresh locks when she tried her key. She would call. She would text. She would ask for access to retrieve personal items. David would arrange a supervised inventory. It would look like kindness. It would be control. We took a breath that felt like a check mark. Then another. Adam watched us work with the expression of a man who has been underwater long enough to forget air has weight. He spoke seldom. When he did, it was to correct a date or add a name or recall the color of a lobby carpet that told him which floor the fraud department uses. He said, "I wrote those letters the day I understood money would not stop asking for me." I said, "You wrote them for this day." He nodded. He did not smile. We printed the last cover pages. We initially knew where the initials belonged. The printer whirred gears, finding teeth paper catching ink. We lined the envelopes along the edge of the table. 12 in all if you counted copies to ourselves and to the file. David gathered them, squared the stack with 2 firm taps, and slid them into a bin he carried like a small suitcase. He looked at me. He said it again because he knows repetition has a job. We let her spend just enough to prove intent. Then we cut the flow. The words were not gloating. They were plumbing. On his way out, he handed me a copy of the amended will. The signature from yesterday sat steady under my son's name, a day that felt like a year. I held it and felt the mild shock of a man trusted with something he never asked to hold. Safekeeping is a heavy word when you are the pair of hands. I walked him to the door. The bin rode his hip like a child who had grown surprisingly dense. Agent Klein nodded once and slipped into the evening. The street gave back its shapes, then kept them. In the quiet after the printer spooled one more sheet I had told it to ignore. A test page. It slid out anyway. I watched the rollers bite and release. I carried the envelopes to the hall, opened the bin by the mail slot, and fed them in one by one. They landed with familiar thuds. Paper traveling. Instructions waking. I brought flowers to a grave that held nothing but air and paperwork. The grounds crew had trimmed the grass to the quick. The headstone looked too new to be believed. I stood with a grocery bouquet cut short to fit the plastic cone. The wind moved just enough to make the ribbon whisper. 31, I said to myself. 29 on the card. 31 in my head. I set the flowers. I touched the cool stone with 2 fingers the way a man touches a door frame he built straight. Mrs. Henderson from down the street appeared with a thermos and a face that has practiced sympathy for decades. Such a tragedy, Henry. So young. She asked if Brooke was holding up. I said she is with family. I did not add which family or which country. She squeezed my arm and left the way people leave when they have done the right thing, and the right thing is small. I went home and opened the blinds to the same height I always do. The house prefers habits. The refrigerator hummed on cue. I checked the bank portal. A red bar where there used to be numbers. Pending legal hold. Joint account access restricted. The sentence looked like a gate settling onto hinges. I opened Instagram without thinking about how that becomes a kind of prayer. Brooke's grid kept its pace. A sunset toast with the caption, "Another day of healing." A spa mirror selfie with a white robe and a mouth that knew its angles. The location tag shifted from Isla Coral to Coral Suites to a rooftop bar that likes Edison bulbs. Javier posted a short video of an engine revving. Commenters asked whose. He replied with an emoji that looked like a shrug and then flexed a forearm across the frame. I called David. He said the first insurer acknowledged receipt. SIU has opened a file. The second insurer flagged the policy numbers and marked the benefits disputed pending investigation. The third asked for a call. He set it for tomorrow. He said the bank hold letter landed at 8:14. The branch manager signed. He likes it when names have times. At noon, I walked the length of the block and waved at Mr. Ortiz as he took down his Halloween lights late. He nodded the nod of a man who knows grief but does not overuse it. Back home, the voicemail light blinked. One from the funeral director about the last invoice. One from the florist about a substitution. Two from numbers I did not know. "Hi, Henry, it's Brooke." Soft, measured eyes on a mirror somewhere. "I know you are hurting. I am hurting too. I had to step away to get my head clear. Please don't think click." Another followed. "Henry, can we meet at the house so I can pick up a few things? My passes aren't working and the locks click." Agent Klein texted a brief line. Freeze confirmed. Travel card decline attempted at Coral Suites. He appended a photo of a corporate reply email. "We regret to inform you that your payment could not be processed. Please see the front desk." I pictured the front desk. Polite firmness has a posture. Day 3. I took coffee to the cemetery at first light. The grass glittered with frost. I spoke 2 sentences to a headstone that contained neither breath nor bone. A jogger circled the path and nodded because cemeteries change the angle of politeness. On the way back, I stopped at the post office. The clerk slid 2 certified mail receipts under the glass. I signed and felt the pen bite the triplicate. Envelopes traveled. I believed in that. Brooke's feed added beach photos with captions about letting go. Friends wrote "Go Queen" and waves and hearts. Her sister posted a story with text layered over blue water. "The only way out is through." Through has many definitions. Mine included wire transfers. Javier's account showed 2 deposits and then a third that failed. The notation in Adam's folder: attempted ACH reversal, insufficient funds hold placed. Voicemails multiplied. Smooth turned to persuasive, turned to sharp. "Henry, it's me. You know I loved Adam." Her voice skimmed a name like a stone. "I need to settle some bills here and the bank is being weird. Can you help for a day or two?" Another: "This is embarrassing. The hotel is saying my card is not working. I think there has been a mistake with the estate. If you could just click." I let the machine catch them. I wrote the times down on a pad near the phone with a pencil that likes to make a point. Day 5. Insurer 3 called. David's voice went into the room I save for people who cannot be distracted. He said, "We will cooperate fully, and we will not be signing anything today." He said words that act like locks. Rescission, material misrepresentation, post-claim underwriting. He left a pause that made the person on the other end check their notes twice. I listened and watched the printer feed freeze notices into its tray. The paper came out warm with a watermark that insisted it was not just paper. Brooke posted a photo of her hand on a balcony rail with the caption "breathing" and a ring I recognized because I had paid the jeweler in installments and he had told me he would give me the good cloth bag for free. Javier commented on a flame and then deleted it. Later that night, he posed himself with a pair of sunglasses in a mirror. Below the photo is a spread of gifts: shoes, a watch, a belt with a buckle that wanted to be seen. The caption said, "Starting the week right." In the morning, the post was gone, the squares rearranged as if no one ever bragged near a fire exit. I mowed the strip of grass by the sidewalk because winter had not fully landed. A boy on a scooter asked if the dead could hear. I said sometimes the living can't, and that seems to be the bigger problem. He scooted on without worrying about my answer. Day 7. The hotel put a polite note on Brooke's door. "Please see the front desk regarding your account." A friend of a friend sent a screenshot because kindness like gossip finds roots. The bank portal showed holds extended. The credit union followed suit. David forwarded an email from an adjuster that used the phrase "egregious circumstances" and then the phrase "urgent review." He added a line at the bottom: "Keep playing the role. We are close to the next cue." The cemetery again. The flowers had browned at the edges, but the ribbon held its job. I replaced them with a new bouquet. I counted 29 on the card again because sometimes you rehearse what you cannot change until it stops asking for something you don't owe it. More voicemails. Tim. "I don't know what you heard, but Instagram is not real life." Her voice had started to fray. She tried to laugh and came up with a noise that was trying out for laughter but didn't get the part. She said, "We are family, and family helps." She said, "I will pay you back." She said, "Please." The please at the end changed shape. It had begun the week as a garnish. It had turned into food. Day 10. Agent Klein texted. FAA hit on outbound manifest. Javier booked to O'Hare, then Mexico City. Watch list ping in Atlanta. He included a single word after. Noted. Bureau men use verbs like stones. I watched Brooke's grid slow. From 3 posts a day to 1. From captions to emojis. From faces to skies. Then another pivot. A throwback photo with Adam at a pumpkin stand. The caption made portions of my face go cold. He would want me to live. Comments clapped. The algorithm is approved. I visited the cemetery at sunset and told the stone a joke about the line drive that chipped the coach's tooth and how he never sent a bill. The wind did not laugh, but it did something that felt like attention. Day 12. Insurer 2 froze the payout pipeline. Insurer 1 notified the bank of a dispute. Insurer 3 asked for a recorded statement and sent a script with questions that operate like traps. Do patiently. David scheduled it for next week. He wanted the exact amount of rope. The voicemail light glowed steadily when I got home. 4 from unknown. 1 from Brooke's sister. We are worried about her mental health. That phrase has a tone. It wanted to build a new narrative while the old one still sat on the table cooling. I saved it and sent it to David. That night, Javier reappeared with a gym mirror video flexing under too much light. Watches, shoes, a folded envelope staged in the corner like an accident. Comments piled. He replied with a wink and a finger to his lips. In the morning, the account was private. By noon, it was gone. Day 14. I took coffee to the porch and listened to a town practice on a weekday. Garbage truck breaks. A dog getting its say. The mail clanked the slot. Freeze notices. Account alerts. A letter from insurer 1 bearing the words investigation initiated and a case number with more digits than I expected. I laid them side by side like tongue depressors. I felt the house settle into its frame. The phone rang while I stood there. Same number as earlier in the week. I let it go to the machine. Henry, please. The voice was smaller. The edges were gone. I could hear room tone behind her hotel air that is pumped through too many lungs. I do not understand. They are saying I cannot check out. They are saying there is a notice. Can you call me? I can explain everything if you just... I let the last message play into silence. Then I pressed save. Her key did not turn. The paper on the door did. Evening had the color of a bruise. Porch light on. Air is cool enough to make breath look honest. I stood on the walk with my hands in my coat and watched Brooke come up the steps with a suitcase that wanted to be a statement. She lifted the handle of the lock. The key met the metal and refused. She tried again. The cylinder stayed still as a held breath. What in the world? She leaned in. The brass looked back without interest. Her eyes found the paper taped at eye level. Official seal. Plain language that does not waste ink. Federal investigation in progress. Access restricted. Contact information given. Do not remove. She reached up like a person who cannot stop themselves from touching a hot stove twice. Do not. I said it softly. She jumped. She had not seen me at the foot of the steps, in the edge of the light. Henry, you scared me. What is this? Why does my key not work? Why is there a notice? She read again, as if the second pass would translate it into a better alphabet. I climbed 2 steps and kept my body square to the street. The doorbell camera blinked its red dot like a small heartbeat. I could see my reflection in its glass. I could see hers and the way her mouth was already assembling a version of events. There is a new lock. I held up a small white receipt. Locksmith. Date and time. Court file number in the corner. The paper felt like authority printed on felt. She reached for the handle again. Do not do that. My voice did not need to rise. The porch knew which tone to respect. I tilted the notice so it caught the light. It says what it says. Federal inquiry. Insurance irregularities. Asset preservation. She made her face soft the way some people make their voice sweet when sugar has left the building. Tim, this is insanity. He died of a heart attack. We have grief. We have bills. The hotel down there. She gestured with her chin like distance made her argument sound more reasonable. I am stuck. I need clothes. I need documents. I need the safe. We can sort the rest later. We are family. I took my phone out and pressed David's name. I set it to speaker and held it at my chest. He answered on the second ring. David. I am on the porch at Adam's house with Brooke. We are looking at the notice. We are looking at a key that does not participate. He knows my cadence. He let me say it in my way. Hello, Brooke, this is David Knorr, counsel for the estate. His voice was even. He read the way a level sits. We advise no entry without inventory and supervision. There is an ongoing investigation into life insurance claims and other matters. The locks have been changed pursuant to a court filing. You may retrieve personal items by appointment. You may not remove financial records. Do you understand? She stared at the phone as if it were the person speaking. I understand this is a mistake. Insurance claims are routine. Adam had policies. He was responsible. He wanted to take care of me. Why would the FBI be involved? The porch air tightened. I watched her hands. They worked at the handle of the suitcase like there was something under the plastic that could make paperwork disappear. David continued. We have documentation suggesting forged signatures. We have transfers to an individual named J. Cruz Services. We have social media posts that complicate the narrative of grief and point to a possible scheme. We will provide the Bureau with everything required. You should obtain counsel. She tried to pull dignity across her shoulders like a shawl. Who is J. Cruz Services? You tell me. Her face flickered. The doorbell camera caught it and tucked it away in whatever pocket doorbell cameras have. Why do you keep saying Bureau? She looked from me to the seal on the paper and back to the little lens that blinked. Her voice shrank. How do they know Cancun? The sentence left her mouth and sat on the step between us. Small, dense, heavier than anything she had said all night. The kind of sentence that does not know it is carrying its own handcuffs. David said, "Thank you." His thank you sounded like a man writing a line with a pencil that can erase the other lines a person spent months drawing. He lowered his tone. Brooke, I suggest you do not say anything else on this porch. There is a recording device. There are witnesses. Call a lawyer. She turned to me as if suddenly remembering I have a face and a history. Henry, please. You know me. You know Adam wanted me safe. You are family. Family shows up. I did not have to lift it. It weighed enough on its own. She flinched like the air had pushed. She tried the key a third time because people do the thing that failed them twice when panic comes. The cylinder stayed the same. The paper on the door stirred a little in the evening air if it were nodding to itself. David spoke again. A supervised inventory can be scheduled for personal clothing and toiletries. No documents, no devices, no access to the safe. We will coordinate with the agents. I will email you a time. Do you have counsel? She looked down at the suitcase. It had one scuff on the side from a carousel. The scuff looked like a small country on a map. I do not need a lawyer. This is a misunderstanding. She was reciting a spell that had stopped working midway through. I looked at the doorbell camera. It looked back without blinking. The red dot carried on. I thought about the folder on my kitchen table. I thought about a signature that leaned wrong and a calendar with green circles where 2 years turned policies into promises for people with timing. I thought about a photo of a balcony hand and a caption that used the word breathing as if air belonged to captions. Brooke sighed, then tried a new room. Tim. I made mistakes. The strain broke me. The past few months were unbearable. You saw it. He was distant. He would not sleep. He would not talk. I had to find a way to keep going. Instagram is not real. Javier is a friend. I needed someone to walk me to the water and tell me I can stand up. The water in the photo was blue because filters decide that is how oceans should be. The sentence over it had said, "Choose joy now. Now is a specific kind of cruelty." David cleared his throat. Brooke, I will repeat this in an email so there is no confusion. You are not to enter. Do not remove this notice. Do not tamper with the lock. Any attempt to do so will be reported. If you arrive unannounced again, we will ask for a patrol presence. We are attempting to keep this civilized. Please do your part. She looked at me instead of the phone. Her eyes tried to pull an old version of us into the present. The Thanksgiving with the burnt rolls. The day the pipe froze, I crawled under the sink and she handed me towels like we were a family. My face did not move. Get a lawyer. I said it clean. No extra words. No apology wrapped around it. She shook her head like a person who hears a diagnosis and wants a second opinion from a cloud. You cannot do this to me. The house is my home. My name is on things. You cannot just shut me out. I nodded at the paper. The paper did the talking. Notices have their own gravity. The changed lock receipt hung from my fingers like a small flag. There is a process. We are in it. That is where this happens now. She took a step back and sat on the top stair without planning to. The suitcase tipped and thumped a riser. The doorbell camera blinked. The porch light hummed. Far down the block, an engine idled. We waited while all of that finished happening. Real time has a way of making itself noticed when you try to rush it. She pressed her palms together and spoke into them. How do they know Cancun? The line returned to her as if the night wanted to make sure she heard it. I did not offer an answer. The camera did not either. Answers were above our pay grade and below our patience. David said my office will be in touch by morning. Then the line went quiet with the authority of a man who does not linger on a porch. Brooke stood. She wiped under one eye with the heel of her hand. The gesture was practiced. It did not find water. She pulled the suitcase upright and set the handle. She looked at me one last time as if there was a back door to this moment, and I knew where it was. Family shows up. I said again, because some sentences need to hear themselves twice to learn they are not going to change. She went down the steps. The wheel on the suitcase caught a crack and stuttered. At the sidewalk, she turned left. The doorbell camera watched her until the edge of its lens said enough. I stepped off the porch and onto the walk. At the corner, a patrol car rolled by slowly. The wash of its lights painted the curb a soft blue and kept going. Justice came at dawn in plain shoes. At 6:32, the phone buzzed once on the nightstand. Not a ring. A polite sign. Agent Klein. We're at her motel. The door answered. Entry lawful. No drama. He does not waste verbs. I sat up, put on my glasses, and looked at the window where the blinds kept the morning from deciding too quickly. The blue before the sun looked like someone had chilled the air from the inside. By 6:46, he sent the first photo the law allows. A shot of the arrest report header without faces. Case number, time, location, 3. Boxes checked: insurance fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. Below a line for property seized. To be attached. A second text: chain of custody initiated for phone, laptop, and 2 tablets. No resistance. One question: how did you know Cancun? I let out a breath that I had been pretending was not in my chest. At 7:03, the desk clerk at the motel called my house phone by mistake. She had my number from the night I covered a florist charge Adam forgot. Sorry to bother you, Mr. Calder. The FBI needed to settle the room balance. She sounded more concerned about the paperwork than the person. I told her she had done the right thing and promised a letter would arrive with the case number for her files. People like letters. They can point at them. I made coffee and stood by the sink. The kitchen window holds the first light the way a throat holds a note before it's sung. The fridge hummed. I opened the envelope David had left the night before, a copy of the petition granting authority to secure the premises and a photocopy of the notice we'd taped. The ink had the faint gloss of a thing not yet scuffed by use. At 7:28, Klein again. She asked about counsel. I told her to make the call. Public defender assigned for arraignment. Bail recommended at $500K based on flight risk and ongoing investigation. He added a sentence that felt like a list, both short and long. Accounts frozen. Liquidity is effectively nil. Translation: bail is a word, not a plan. I called David and left a message he could play at the office. She's in. Charges as expected. He would like the phrase. As expected keeps lawyers from overeating their adrenaline. At 8:12, Klein sent a snapshot of the charge sheet's first page with the names blacked but the counts clear. Insurer A, attempted fraud. Insurer B, fraudulent application and misrepresentation. Insurer C, wire fraud. One section for conspiracy with unnamed co-conspirators. The last line read the subject's social media activity relevant to intent. The word relevant can carry so much on its back when it needs to. I put the pages side by side on the table like tongue depressors. Underneath them, the wood grain made slow rivers that didn't care about our law. I added a manila folder labeled Brooke Arraignment. Inside, I put a single index card with the date and time. 1:30, courtroom 4B. A thing is easier to bear when you give it a place to sit. At 9:05, the bank portal coughed up 3 alerts. Hold extended. Attempted debit decline, Coral Suites. Attempted wire reversal flag. I printed the alerts and set them on the stack where the receipts live. The printer gave me its little warm breath and then rested. By 10:20, Klein knocked on my door. No show. A man in a jacket that did not advertise anything. He took off his gloves in the doorway. "We prefer coffee black when we're writing property receipts," he said without smiling. He put a copy of the chain of custody form on my table. Phone Apple, iPhone IMEI listed SIM, removed bagged and tagged. Laptop gray charger, recovered power state low to the lab. 2 tablets, screen-locked evidence bags sealed at scene by S.A. Mahoney. He initialed the corner. The initials looked like a fence for small letters to lean on. He gave me a plain update. She made 1 call. Sister. Said the word mistake twice and the word unfair 3 times. We don't record counsel calls. He looked at my coffee and then back at the paper. Will arraign before lunch. No bail was posted at that figure with those holds. He slipped a card across in case anyone tries to charm access to the house or office. Tell them to call me. He doesn't posture. He organizes. At 10:42, he said the part that made the morning turn its head. Your landscaper friend tried to bolt south. Javier Cruz. Ticketed O'Hare to Mexico City. Layover Atlanta. Watch list ping from insurance SIU referrals plus our ad. TSA pulled him for secondary. He lawyered with a shrug, but no counsel was present yet. We flagged his bags. He's not under arrest on our file today. He's under notice. That's enough to make his week long and his phone quiet. I pictured the gym mirror, the watch, the belt that wanted to be seen. Then I pictured a gate agent with a voice that sounds like politeness pressed into a uniform. Sir, we need you to step over here. Consequences often speak softly. At 11:07, I called Adam from a number we change weekly. He answered on the second ring the way sons used to when there was only 1 phone in the kitchen. He listened without asking me to repeat anything. When I said bail, he made a sound that was almost a laugh and then wasn't. I heard the small kettle tick in his place. He said, I almost feel sorry for her. Almost isn't pity, I said. He let the sentence sit like a stone on a table. We spoke about Javier. He said he always moved as if he had already forgiven himself for what he would do next. I wrote that sentence down because some sentences like to be written. I told Adam I would meet him where we planned this afternoon. He said the elevator on the north side is quieter. He meant the hospital. He meant the next phase. Resurrection is not a word you say in a hallway. You say appointment. You say correction. You say the kinds of words that do not make people argue. At 11:40, David called back from a corridor with marble and poor acoustics. The bottle is corked, he said, meaning bail. Arraignment at 1:30. If she tries to speak for herself, let her. We want the record. If she asks you to intercede, say no. You do not belong in that room. He paused. Henry, we are close to the handover. Breathe in the right order. He hung up like a man who trusts the process and writes his fear on yellow paper instead of his face. Noon. I ate standing up. Cheese, 2 crackers, the end of an apple that had waited a day too long. I watered the plant by the window because it had done nothing wrong. I put on the suit that looks least like a suit and most like good manners. I placed the amended will and the hospital letter in a folder with a red tab. Red return. A label can be a prayer if you let it. At 1:18, I parked in the garage under the hospital and walked the corridor that smells like hand gel and determination. The elevator lobby on the north side is always 5 degrees colder. The stainless doors reflect enough to show you are older than you remembered. I pressed the button and watched the arrow consider it. My phone buzzed once more before the doors opened. Klein. Arraigned. Public defender entered, not guilty. Remand pending verification. Press is already sniffing. We'll keep your names out as long as we can. He added a final line like a mechanic tucking a note under a wiper. Javier's rebook was denied. Secondary extended. Bags to CBP. Enjoy your afternoon. I put the phone away and looked up. Across the hall, a child in a mask pointed at a fish in a tank and laughed without worrying about who heard. A nurse pushed a cart and nodded at me like we were both keeping promises. The elevator doors slid open. Stainless turned our faces into a thin mirror. I stepped in. Adam stepped in from the opposite side, cap, low mask on the sweater that makes him look like he belongs anywhere. We did not touch. The doors slid shut on our reflections, making 2 men into one shape for a breath, then turned us quiet again. They called it a recording error. I called it air in my lungs. Dr. Cho used the phrase catatonic misclassification, then stacked the paper that would make it so. She spoke to the chief of staff in a voice that could hold a room without raising itself. Monitors age, cables fatigue, Mondays are heavy. A flat line can masquerade when a ward is moving 3 problems at once. The hospital's counsel nodded in the way counsel nods when the path has fewer thorns than the alternatives. They would cover costs. They would write apologies that did not say sorry out loud but carried it in the shape of the sentences. She slid the correction letter toward me. Heavy bond seal pressed clean dates aligned. It had language about remediation, patient identification, reconciliation, and a final paragraph that reclassified Adam as having been in a catatonic state with suppressed voluntary response. The word deceased no longer appeared. The room felt larger by the width of that absence. Agent Klein read it once, then again, then made a short call to 2 offices where acronyms do their breathing. The insurers received copies within the hour. Void their emails said the next day, a word that floats like a cork and then sinks the whole bottle. Paid out benefits rescinded pending restitution. Cases escalated to special investigations. A 3rd message arrived from a claims vice president who prefers law to headlines. We regret the confusion. We accept the correction. The important verbs lived in the attachments. At arraignment number 2, Brooke pled into a microphone that did not know her, and the public defender kept his hand at the small of her back the way good ones do when the floor has turned to water. The counts held. The bond held. Intent had learned to spell itself in her comments and in the timing of wires. A sentencing date set itself on the court's calendar like a season. When it came, the words were numbers and the numbers were years. 12 with restitution with supervision. She did not look at me. I did not look for that. Javier chose motion. It was the only language he had. The motion ended in a glass room with people who asked you to turn out your pockets as if you were emptying your life into a tray. He will have time to reconsider what a watch says about a man when he likes to hold his wrist up to mirrors. David pushed a single sheet across my table one afternoon with a notary stamp still damp at the corner. New LLC certificate, Calder and Noor Ethics Consulting, Tampa office. 2 articles advisory to boards on disclosure and integrity. Risk audits for clinical programs in translation. I held the paper like a carpenter holds a plan, checking that the load will ride the strongest beams. He set 2 keys in a blue dish, one for the door that faces the river, one for the cabinet where the files sleep. The sound they made in the dish was small and domestic. It sounded like a life measured, not chased. We found modest rooms on the 2nd floor of a brick building that has minded its business since the 70s. The owner kept a ledger by hand and prefers tenants who stay late and turn lights off. We brought 1 desk each, a filing cabinet, and a plant that did not ask much. The first retainer arrived with a handshake from a firm that liked that we did not promise to fix reputations. We promised to find the truth and write it in paragraphs that regulators will not ignore. A portion of that check slid quietly into a new account with another stamp. Arthritis trial, small grants seated in Adam's mother's name for patients who lost days to a drug that was never allowed to be honest. It wasn't much. It was the right first thing. Adam's return to paper required more steps than a soldier's parade. Dr. Cho handled the medical. David handled the civil. Klein handled the spaces where a name appears because a system cannot stand silence. DMV. SSA. A bank manager who held his breath while he scanned the letter and then exhaled like a man who'd been underwater for a minute longer than he meant to be. Each counter gave us back a piece. None of them gave us back time. That is not their job. We did not hold a party. We did not mark the date with cake. We bought a cheap coffee maker for the office that clicked when it finished brewing and did not leak. Adam pinned a small card above his desk with the words, "Tell the hardest truth first." He wore the old wool sweater on mornings when the air learned how to be Floridian. He read drafts out loud to hear where they lay without intending to. He answered emails like a man who knows silence can be mistaken and words can be misused. He signed his new name with a steady hand, the letters clean and forward the way a person walks when he understands what ground can do. One afternoon, he asked me if I ever wished we had stopped sooner. We were standing by the window where the river tricks the eye into thinking the city moves. He did not look at me when he asked, "Do you regret any of it?" "Only what made it necessary," I said. The words felt like they had been waiting for their turn on the tongue. We learned Tampa's mornings by the sound of gulls complaining about their lot. We learned the short route that dodges a school zone and the long route that lets the horizon show off after rain. We ate at a lunch counter where a woman called everybody sugar, and meant it as arithmetic, not romance. The office gained a second plant and a stapler with better teeth. We placed the hospital letter in a frame behind the door, not for show, for us, so that when doubt sat in a chair and crossed its legs, we had a way to make it stand again. Brooke's lawyer sent notes from time to time, formal lines about inventory and disposition, and a question about a wedding album. David scheduled supervised access, made lists, and checked boxes. Items with sentiment but no power left the house in a banker's box carried by a deputy who could thread his own needle. Everything with leverage stayed. The safe gave up what paper it had to give. The door never learned a new key that would accept her hand. The insurers concluded their work. Payments were voided, penalties were assessed, and a final letter was sent to me as personal representative asking where to forward the balance after fees. I told them to follow the court's order and keep the handwriting tidy. I did not want souvenirs. We visited the grave on a night that did not need coats. The headstone still said a thing that had been legally untrue for months. We brought a screwdriver and a small tube of epoxy. The fix took 10 quiet minutes. Adam ran his thumb over the new plate. He liked the weight of truth when it sits flush. Sometimes at the end of the day, a client leaves and the office is so still you can hear the AC thinking. Adam turns off the lamp on his desk. We pause at the keys in the dish. He takes one, I take the other. There is no ritual beyond that. Keys are not mystical, they are agreements you honor. When Tampa began to feel like more than coordinates, I drove back north for a week to a house that knows my footsteps. I put a kettle on because people like to be told that nothing dramatic is going to happen today. Morning decided to meet me kindly. I took a shadow box from a closet and spread the contents on the table. A photo of Adam at 10, gap-toothed and proud, beside a birdhouse he painted the green he thought trees should be. A brass key from the first place he rented, teeth worn down by too many pockets. I mounted the photo beside the key, centered it in the box, tightened the tabs, and hung it on the kitchen wall where the light is best. The screws bit and held. I stood back then, stepped forward, and straightened the edge a notch because he would have. I turned to the back door and tested the lock. The cylinder turned. The bolt found its home. The sound it made was small and sufficient. Quiet held. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the playlist now showing on screen.